Part 2, Forgiveness. Welcome to part 2 of our journey, Forgiveness. In this segment, we dive into the profound power of forgiveness as a transformative tool for healing and personal growth. Let's explore the essence of forgiveness and understand how it can liberate us from the weight of the past, grievances, paving the way for emotional freedom. Now, what is forgiveness? Forgiveness is not just an act, it is a state of being. It is the conscious choice to release feelings of resentment or vengeance towards someone or even ourselves. It doesn't justify the actions that led to hurt, but rather it frees us from the emotional shackles that bind us to the past. Forgiveness is a gift we give to ourselves, allowing space for healing and growth. Now, the power of forgiveness is something that we don't necessarily understand or even know or get to experience unless we actually do the work to forgive. As forgiveness is healing emotional wounds, because it acts as a healing balm for emotional wounds. It doesn't erase the past, but it changes the way we relate to it. By letting go of resentment, for example, we create space for emotional well-being. It also allows us to liberate ourselves from emotional burdens. Holding on to grudges burdens the soul. Forgiveness liberates us from the weight of resentment, offering a path to emotional freedom. It's a conscious decision to unshackle ourselves from the past. Now, forgiveness in itself can be very similar to addiction to some degree. And why do I say this? Well, I've done a lot of research throughout the years, and I observed the behaviors of countless amounts of people throughout my entire life. And when I go to pick up on patterns and behaviors and analyze the why behind these, I started to realize that those individuals that were unable to forgive were not that far off from those who were stuck in the influence of addiction. And when you think about addiction, you're thinking drugs and alcohol and sex and validation and partying and stuff. But addiction is something that we are unable to stop or let go of. So that can also look like being codependent of somebody and unable to let go of them, even though we know they're not so healthy for us or they're toxic for our life and in the direction of our goals. This can also be addictions towards distractions, where we're constantly distracting ourselves with mundane things, whether it's TV, being on the phone all the time, shopping, watching TV, working, cleaning, constantly doing, so that we don't allow ourselves the opportunity to sit with ourselves. It is another form of escapism. So when we are in addiction, we are escaping the truth of what we can be without that which we are addicted to. And when you think about forgiveness is us being addicted to playing victim, being addicted to the story, being addicted to the wounds and the emotional burdens that we've been living by for so long. Sometimes it's all we know. If the inability of forgiveness came from an early age, for example. So the story we've been telling ourselves as to why we are how we are and why we do what we do normally comes from an origin of our inability to forgive and experience a trauma or a situation that occurred that placed us in the position of an emotional wound, of pain, of suffering of some sort. So when it comes to the levels of consciousness, a person that is unable to let go of the past and unable to forgive is very close in proximity to those who are very challenged of letting go of vices like gambling or drinking or drugs or sex and so on. Because the actual act of letting go of things that are holding us in bondage and shackles into our own demise, into the denser vibrational levels of our experience, are those things that hinder our development, our growth, our evolution, and our ability to step fully into our self-mastery. So when it comes to the power of forgiveness, when you truly forgive and you learn to correctly forgive from the heart, from the ability of opening your heart to do so, it is one of the most liberating things that can occur. And I'm speaking this of experience because I myself had to reflect on aspects of myself that were still lingering to stories and traumas from my past experiences that couldn't understand the why behind why it was done, why it happened. And I held resentment towards, the person. And it was because I couldn't see their point of view and I couldn't understand why they would do it that created this internal suffering or wound in me. It was hard for me to forgive. And as the beautiful orchestration of life occurs, I was given the gift through my life experiences to have the opportunity to experience certain things of my own as an adult, so that in that experience, as I self-reflected and became aware of certain patterns, certain influences, certain stresses, certain challenges, I was able to now resonate with this individual, and who was one of my parents, in this case, my father. I couldn't understand, because me being the way I am, but I was actually the way I am. I'm actually the way I am because of certain experiences I had as a child, which is good in many factors, but also challenging in others. And I witnessed the experience, for example, of my dad working a lot. He was not emotionally available all the time. And I didn't feel the love and the care I felt from my mother from him. But I was yet so attached to him. And I love my, father. I still do. But it created an internal wound in me, right? And I didn't notice that until I got older. And then when I got older and I noticed where it came from, I was kind of resentful, because I was like, well, that must have happened because of this, and that must have happened because of that. And now look at who I am because of him. And, I guess we all go through this stage once we come into the awareness of our molding through our development. And it wasn't until I had my own personal experiences that allowed me to resonate with my father's experiences, to understand that if a person is not conscious, if a person is not aware of their doings, if a person doesn't prioritize certain things and see through the lines of certain other things, it becomes easy to fall for certain influences and certain norms, and continuing the same cycles over and over again. And I saw the challenge that adulting could be through my own adulting, for example. And it allowed me to have compassion towards my father. And in that compassion, I remember 2015, I had a situation that I caught myself under certain peer pressures and stuff, and I was like, this must have been what my father had to deal with. And now that I had my own personal experience, my own levels of stresses, and my own dilemma, I was able to have compassion because I was able to put myself in his shoes because I had a similar experience, that I was able to resonate with his perception through placing myself to view his perspective. And as soon as I was able to do this, forgiveness came natural because I step into the common humanity of all of us. I saw through the challenges that life can be. I saw through the strengths and weaknesses that a person could have or not have. And based on those choices is what creates the experience that you give not only yourself, but those in your proximity. And because I saw certain negative aspects of those choices within my father's experience, I chose differently. And when I was able to choose differently, I also realized that it was because my father chose a different route that I was able to see the cause and effects of that choice, which is the why behind why I chose differently. So when I realized that everything is interconnected and everything is happening for me and not to me, and everything has purpose and meaning as to the why behind it, I stopped taking life so personal. I stopped getting so easily offended. And I started allowing and accepting people for who they are, as who they choose to be. Because everybody is on their own journey, making their own choices based on their own beliefs and the way they choose to perceive their experience of life. And as soon as I came into this realization, 2015, I sent my father a text. And one of the first things I mentioned was, I know you love me in your own way, based on what you know, based on what you had experienced with your own parents, based on the resources you had, and knowing that you did the best you could. Because even though you weren't what I thought you should be, based on my own fairy tale programming, cultivated by the programming on TV, for example, you show me how you could love me in your own way. And that way was the right way for me. Because you did the best you could, but the best you could was what I needed so that I can be more independent in my own experience. Meaning, there was a reason behind why I chose you to be my father, is basically what I was trying to say. And that I loved him for that reason, because I'm sure that the reason I chose him was because there was more to me that I had to learn. And had he been what I needed, or what I perceived that I needed based on my current programming at that time, I would have never had the internal abilities and strength and fortitude and independence that I have still to this day, had he been different. And instead of feeling that resentment now for my father, I gained a level of gratitude. And I was able to now see all the ways that he did love me, because the tainting of the wound had faded. And when the tainting of that wound had faded, I was able to see the full spectrum of my experience with my father, because it was no longer narrowed down to those moments where I felt maybe neglected and I didn't feel loved and supported and cared for by him. So you see how the power of forgiveness is so massive, because what happens is we only see the pain and the distortion in our experience in a full spectrum. Something that was only a moment, maybe a day, maybe a short period of time, can taint our full experience with an individual if we don't learn how to truly forgive them. And how do you forgive them? Let's step into the practices that we can actually do. So the practical techniques for forgiveness, what are those? For the first one, we have self-reflection on the hurt. Begin by reflecting on the hurt or grievances you've been carrying. Understand the impact on your emotional well-being and acknowledge the weight it possesses. So in the example I just gave you, which is why I brought it up, so that we can go through this through an example that could be understood, is when I was able to self-reflect on how my inability to forgive my father for those wounds of neglect, right, that I had with him, I was noticing that pain, that hurt, had me attracting men that were maybe emotionally unavailable, right? Because I had yet to forgive my father. And because I had yet to forgive my father and clear my full vision of my experience with my father, because I was focusing on the negative aspects, I had to heal that aspect in me. And because that is an aspect in me that I have to heal and forgive and let go, life is going to continue giving me the opportunity to have the experience so that I can interact with the same energy, that of what I perceive my father to represent, so that in that interaction, in that partnership, in that conflict, I can wake up to the truth that this is just a moment of experience that I have to overcome, that I have to let go, that I have to forgive. This is a narrative that is going to continue to play in my story until I learn to forgive, because it is tainting my totality of an experience, let's say with a man, because there is a slight belief in me that believes that men are emotionally unavailable. Because the example I had of my father, who was the first man in my life, was that he was emotionally unavailable for me. Because that was my primary focus. Because that focus came from a wound. That wound came from a moment that I felt neglected. That neglect that I needed as a child who was not able to process what was happening, therefore feeling neglected and unworthy of the Father's love. So it amplified, because now it's going into my subconscious mind. It's going to my right hemisphere, for example, the feminine energy. You give it one seed and it amplifies and makes it more of a garden. So that seed of negativity, of a distorted perception from that experience, from that wound, was now being amplified in my experience with men. And it's not to say that I always experience the emotionally available men, because it was just a fragment. But when I did, that was a memory that came to resurface. Why did it come to resurface? Because there was an aspect, an element in me that had to be healed. And in order for me to heal it, I needed to process it. In order for me to even find it, to process it, it needed to be triggered. It needed to be resurfaced. So that by it resurfacing, if I'm doing the work and I'm doing it right, I am becoming aware as I self-reflect on my own internal dialogue, on my own reactions, on my own triggers, on my own narratives. Which is why life is always giving us the opportunity to self-reflect and process wounds and emotions and beliefs that are distorting the full spectrum of our experience. So sometimes it doesn't even have to be something you went through or something that even reflects you. It could be a belief system that came from someone else, that didn't even come from a personal experience that you had. But if you have someone constantly telling you the same story since you can remember, that is now a belief system that is distorting your perception of your experience, because you have accepted that belief as truth. So in the case of the experience that I had with my father, I was able to finally self-reflect on my pain as I went through my experience, and I said, wow, this must have been what my father was dealing with, under these pressures, under these stresses, under these influences, under placing myself in environments maybe I shouldn't be, and so on. And I was able to find the why behind he was there, right? Because he had kids to feed and stuff like that. And it was like, wow, here I am understanding and seeing my father's point of view. Now my pain isn't so intense because I'm gaining this level of self-compassion for my father. I am now seeing the full spectrum of the experience. That it was more than just the effect, the cause to the effect of me being hurt. There was an effect that was happening prior, and it was just going full circle. And here I am in my own personal experience as an adult going through something similar. I'm able to gain compassion for that pain within me. And when I'm able to gain compassion, I am now able to relate and resonate with my father's point of view. Therefore, allowing myself to put myself in his shoes and allowing myself to fully and truly forgive him, which is going into our second practical technique of forgiveness, is understanding others' perspective. Practice empathy by trying to understand the perspective of those who may have caused you pain. This doesn't justify their actions, but opens a door to compassion, which is what I did. And when I was able to do that, it brought a resolution between my relationship with my father. Something that I didn't think was important at the time until it was. Something that I didn't think would make such an impact of me forgiving until I did. Something that allowed us to get closer and gain more resonance with each other as adults. Being able to bring that harmony and that forgiveness and that level of understanding, which then deepens our bond and our connection, right? Because it was like me seeing the me in him and him seeing the him in me brought us closer without the chaos or the distortion of the pain that was blocking us from doing so. And for the third, we have writing a forgiveness letter. So in my example, like I said, I wrote him a text that said, I just want you to know that I know you did the best you could with what you knew, with the resources you had, and the example that you were given growing up. And I love you for everything you did for me, because I know you did the best you could with what you had. And I forgive you for every form of emotion and grievances and resentment that I had towards you. Because now as an adult, I can see through your eyes or through your perspective how hard it is to be an adult and be with kids and stuff like that. So that allowed me to forgive, but not only forgive for myself, but bring that clarity and that closure to my father, deepening the bond between us and bringing us even closer. I mean, we were never not close, but we definitely got closer after I was able to forgive those aspects within our relationship. So if you write a letter of forgiveness, it is not something you have to necessarily give to the person that hurt you. It is something more for yourself so that you can express and pour your feelings onto the paper. so that you can address every pain that you're feeling as you self-reflect on what is causing you, how has it hindered your life experience, and allow yourself to fully express authentically. And it could just be something for you. It doesn't have to be shared with anyone. It could just be for you to share so that you can resurface these emotions and let that pain out, let that wound out, let that resentment and vengeance or whatever it is that this lack of forgiveness has given you. And if you want, you can make it into something you let go. You can burn the paper afterwards, but allow yourself to do it as many times as you need to, but just resurface it and allow it to be released from you. Because remember, forgiveness is for you and not for the other person. But by placing yourself in the position to perceive the other person's experience and the why behind it, and maybe ask yourself, if I was this individual, had experienced what they experienced, had chose to perceive life this way, had allowed myself to be influenced by my environment and become a product of my environment and my upbringing and so on, and understanding that hurt people, and ignorance plays a big role, then it becomes a lot easier to forgive others, right? Because who's to say that you won't be the same result of who they are if you had went through the same thing, right? Because we don't all know the why behind people's stories and the way and the why as to why they chose to be who they are and why they chose to do what they did. We really don't know. Everyone has a story that no one knows about. So it is very important that for us to really elevate and step into true self-mastery, we have to be able to master these emotional states that only hinder our growth and our evolution into self-mastery. They're not doing us any service. In fact, they're just putting us in a disadvantage of any form of attraction, of manifestation, of healing, and of growth. There's nothing that's coming out of it. Now, forgiveness is powerful and beautiful and very liberating to the soul, to the mind, to the body. But we also have to focus on what forgiveness is not, right? Because just because you forgive doesn't mean you have to bring yourself to be involved with the person again or enable their behaviors and so on. So forgiveness is not excusing harmful actions. Forgiveness doesn't mean excusing or condoning harmful actions. It's about releasing the emotional attachment to those actions for your own well-being, right? Disconnecting ourselves and detaching from the story, from the pain, from the experience altogether, and cleaning that slate within our psyche so that we can move forward in a much lighter state of mind, right? Forgiveness is not immediate rebuilding of trust. Forgiving someone doesn't necessitate a immediate rebuilding of trust. Trust is earned over time, and forgiveness is a separate process, right? So when a person shows you who they are, I always say believe them. Don't try to assume anything otherwise. Because they can say all they want to say, but their actions are going to say everything you need to know. So just because you have the compassion within you to forgive, it doesn't mean you have to trust the person ever again. It doesn't mean you have to be around the person ever again. It doesn't mean you have to respect the person, right? You just learn how to place people according to who they show you who they are, so that you can keep them at a distance if you have to, or up close if you can, if you want to. But it does not necessarily mean rebuilding that trust again. Which brings us into integration into daily life. So a way that we can integrate forgiveness daily is being mindful. Mindful forgiveness practice. So incorporating forgiveness into your mindful practices. When negative thoughts arise, consciously choose forgiveness, redirecting your energy towards healing. So remember, These thoughts and these emotions and these triggers can only occur if there's something within you that still needs to be healed and processed and let go of. So when you have a negative thought arise, you have to be conscious of this negative thought as you allow yourself to get in the habit and the behavior pattern of reflecting on everything that happens within you. So that when it does come about, you make a conscious choice to step into forgiveness. How do you step into forgiveness? Stepping into compassion, putting yourself into someone else's shoes, and reflecting on all the possibilities that you too can be that person. So the resentment, the anger, the hate, all of that will cease to exist, because by opening your heart to being more compassionate towards yourself and others, it becomes a lot easier to be in the forgiveness and the letting go of these negative thoughts in yourself, but also in the actions of others. The second way is daily forgiveness affirmations. Create daily forgiveness affirmations. Affirm your commitment to forgiveness and release, reinforcing your journey towards emotional liberation. So as soon as we put the intention that we're no longer going to hold on to any form of resentment or anger or revenge or hate and all that, because we understand that these energies only hinder our growth and our development and our manifestation into the life that we want to experience, we're no longer going to entertain it. In fact, we're going to learn how to counteract it whenever we see and we find ourselves stepping into the motion of any form of lack of forgiveness, right? Because now we understand that by keeping our heart open and understanding our own humanity and our common humanity with others, we no longer take things personally and get offended. Why would we do that? That's going against the path of us moving forward. So now we have the intention that we're going to move forward. We have the intention that we're going to heal. We have the intention that we're going to be stepping into self-mastery. That intention alone is going to place us in the direction to align with what's going to get us that way. Meaning, to lack self-forgiveness is contradicting and counteracting that intention. So we're not going to allow it or condone it. We are going to commit ourselves to make sure to always be in the energy of forgiveness and releasing, because we are making sure that we are not holding the emotional baggages and hindrances in our journey, so that we can truly be liberated by the pain and the suffering that we ourselves create within ourselves by holding on to these very things. Bringing us back into the conclusion. As we conclude part 2 of our exploration into forgiveness, remember that forgiving is not forgetting. It's choosing to no longer be defined by the wounds of the past. Embrace forgiveness as a key to your personal healing and growth. May this practice bring you the peace and freedom you desire.